Welcome to Masikhanye, Rays of Hope, a Christian talk show that seeks to empower you, family, and societies to lead holistic lives as you seek to make this world a better place. Today, we are going to talk about the Sabbath. We continue with our theme of the Sabbath, but from a social justice perspective. Does God, through the Sabbath, care how this world is run? And to help me look into that conversation, I am joined by our resident pastor, Pastor Patrick Stander. Pastor Stander, welcome to Masikhanye.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
Unjani mfundisi?
Siyaphila ninjani?
Siyaphila khona. Look, I don't want us to forget this because this is quite exciting for me. Later on this month, and we keep saying this, in 2 weeks' time, before from the 25th, right? Mm-hmm. We are starting that inspirational week of prayer. Talk to me about it.
Yes, we have a series that we are planning, Stories of Hope. And we want to connect our lived stories with the biblical story so that we can get very important lessons from God's Word.
Sure.
And so we are looking forward to having our friends nightly. Sure. And then on the 31st, Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, we have a date.
This platform, Pumakapa.
This same platform.
You heard it from here, and I trust that you're going to be joining us. All right, Pastor Stander, let's delve into what we're going to be talking about today. From the Sabbath, in the Sabbath, what do we learn about God and how He relates to all His creation?
Now, the question is pregnant. It's a loaded question. And I want to talk about God's attitude towards the downtrodden. And we're going to specifically look at an interesting story from the Gospel according to Luke. And having mentioned that we are dealing with the Gospel according to Luke, it's important to note that Luke is actually the Gospel that reveals God with a human face.
Sure, I love that.
Now let's help each other with this. If you compare it to the Gospel according to John, the Gospel according to John is highly theological because Jesus is introduced in a very interesting way because we are told that He is God. John doesn't waste time. He just gets straight into it. But Luke, on the other hand, presents God with a human face. And this is why you have very interesting stories. You have the elevation of the poor. You have the weak receiving power. You have women coming to the fore. You have the powerless finding hope and power in Jesus.
Sure.
And so when you read the song of Mary, you read what Elizabeth says when you have the announcement of the birth of their children.
Sure.
You see that they perceive God as the one that lifts up and uplifts the poor. At the same time, you will see that unlike Matthew's gospel, that has a very specific Jewish emphasis, Luke's gospel has a more universal appeal. In that when you read the family tree of Jesus according to Luke, Luke traces the family heritage of Jesus right back to Adam and ultimately back to God. And so our common ancestry in Adam is emphasized in Jesus. And so both Adam and Christ function as the common denominators between us as human beings.
Sure.
So I came in a roundabout fashion.
Yeah.
So when you look at this story is intriguing because here you see the Bible says in Luke chapter 13, picking it up from verse 10.
Sure.
And He was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, He being Jesus. And there was a woman who for 18 years had a sickness caused by a spirit, and she was bent double and could not straighten up at all.
Sure.
When Jesus saw her, He called her over and said to her, "Woman, you are freed from your sickness." And He laid His hands on her, and immediately she was made erect again and began glorifying God. But the synagogue official, indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, began saying to the crowd in response, "There are 6 days in which work should be done. So come during them and get healed, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the stall and lead him away to water him? And this woman, a daughter of Abraham, as she is, whom Satan has bound for 18 long years, should she not have been released from this bond on the Sabbath day?" As he said this, all his opponents were being humiliated, and the entire crowd was rejoicing over all the glorious things being done by him. That's power right there.
That's just powerful.
Yeah.
I love the choice. I mean, the choice of words that Jesus uses, bondage.
Yeah.
And of course, before you go ahead, I love that you've chosen this story, that talks about Jesus healing not just on the Sabbath, but healing a woman that was sick. And I'm looking forward to what you have to say, but already you've caught my attention. Please go ahead, Pastor Samuel.
Look, we know from extra-biblical literature, in other words, material outside of the Bible, that there are certain prayers that were offered by men from Christ's community at the time, in which they would pray and thank God that He created them men. And in reciting these prayers, these men are reported to have said, "I thank you for not creating me a Gentile, for not creating me a woman, and for not creating me a dog." Linking women and dogs. So you can imagine already the position in society occupied by women, because you had a patriarchal society where some women were treated like nothing. And that was never God's intention. And so the Sabbath then reveals a God to us that treats everybody equally.
I love that. I love that.
So
Sabbath as the equalizer of humanity.
The equalizer of humanity. And you see in the face of Jesus a revelation of God and how God treats people, regardless of the rules and regulations of society. And I want to suggest that the Sabbath, rightly understood, rightly observed, is countercultural because it challenges the norms of society. It challenges religious norms. It challenges stuff that we have created in the name of God. So here you see God acting in a powerful way to help the one who has no power in society.
I love the point that you've just said, and I hope you're not going to lose your thought that the Sabbath, rightly understood, is countercultural. Then it explains what we discussed last week in the story that we read, and even today, that Jesus, because there are those that says, I mean, look at Jesus, he also broke the Sabbath. And so it should mean that it was not important. But what you are saying is that Jesus broke the Sabbath the way it was known or taught by the culture of the then leaders. And he wanted to fix it to its rightful understanding. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. So Jesus broke cultural norms that were imposed onto the Sabbath.
I like that.
And so with anything good, you run the risk of it being hijacked
and abused
misused by the ones to whom it has been entrusted. And so this gift that God has given to us as the human race has been abused by some of us. And so we've used it also to impose our will onto other people.
Sure.
And so here you see now in the story this revelation of God's attitude towards the downtrodden. You also see in this deliverance that God reveals himself in a manner that restores the personhood of this woman. This revelation brings about a restoration of her human dignity, her personhood. Because can you imagine being doubled down or bent over for 18 long years?
Sure.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's unimaginable. But this story also reveals the bigotry of the religious leadership and religious community of the time. It reveals the cruelty of Satan. But above all, it reveals the love of God and his interest in people being treated equally and fairly. All right?
Sure.
But now there's an interesting thing that I want us to pick up on in what this gentleman is saying in verse 14 in response to Jesus' deliverance and how he delivers the woman. It says, but the synagogue official, indignant, is upset because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, began saying to the crowd in response, there are 6 days in which work should be done. So he's concerned about the letter of the law.
Once again,
Yes. So come during them and get healed, and not on the Sabbath day. So he's telling God what to do.
On the day that he created.
On the day that he created.
I like that.
So God is being glorified here. But remember, the minute the woman is revealed or restored, and she starts rejoicing and she starts praising the name of God, the guy gets upset. In the face of somebody who is rejoicing over her deliverance, because she is now able to stand erect. And he's upset. He's indignant. He is protecting the thing of God against God.
So, I love that. So I mean, when I look at this, the guy is obviously, when you read what you've just read, what he says to the people, he's upset that somebody would be healed on Sabbath. But you can see the upset is really directed at Jesus as well. That how can you heal people on Sabbath?
Yeah. How can you? And now Jesus calls him out for his hypocrisy. He calls him out. He says, you guys are concerned about your animals because you've got animals and you care for them rightly so. Because true Sabbath observance creates in our thinking a concern for creation.
All creation.
For all creation. Because if you remember, when you go back to Genesis chapter 1, when God created humanity, he created them in his image and entrusted into their care his creation. So he created them and blessed them, and contained in the blessing was the ability to procreate as well as to care for creation. So here Jesus says, you are hypocrites because you care for other created beings, your own created beings, because and animals, because they will benefit you. Caring for your animals is beneficial to you. It's going to be good for you. But when God now shows interest, God in the flesh shows interest in another human being,
you've got a problem with that.
Like you have a problem. How then? How do you explain that? And so Jesus calls that hypocrisy. We have concern for the lower orders of creation, but we are not concerned about human beings such as ourselves. And now here I'm going to start getting into trouble. You cannot then be a Sabbath keeper and understand that the seventh day Sabbath has been given to us as a gift by the Creator, you cannot embrace that reality and be a racist. You can't embrace that and be a sexist.
Sure.
You can't.
Sure.
Because you can't feel that because you are a man, you are better than a woman.
Sure.
And be a true Sabbath keeper at the same time.
Sure.
You can't find yourself trapped in classism
Sure.
and be
Yeah.
a true Sabbath keeper.
Sure.
You can't be a tribalist and say you believe that the God who created us from a common ancestry in Adam. Because in Adam, we share the same blood.
Sure. Sure.
We
You
come
can't
from
even
one
be
place.
xenophobic.
You can't be xenophobic.
Sure.
Because you have embraced the God who is the equalizer and the God who has given us a gift that sets all of us on the same footing.
And the Sabbath is that gift.
The Sabbath is that gift.
Pastor Standard, I know we could go on for another hour speaking about this, but thank you so much for joining us right now at Masikhanye.
Thank you, sir.
Our viewers, I trust that you absolutely enjoyed that, how this Sabbath gift makes all of us, or reminds all of us, that we are equal. We are not yet done. Please do not go anywhere. We'll be back soon. Molweni Monti, molweni eGqeberha, molweni eMthatha, molweni eMpuma Kapa naseMzantsi Africa. Guys, you cannot miss this. I've got exciting news. eMpuma Kapa TV, my resident pastor on Masikhanye, Pastor Patrick Sander, is going to be holding a very inspirational week called Stories of Hope on the last week of July, the 25th to the 31st. I'm going to be there. My family, my friends watching, please do come join us as well. Bye-bye. Sabona nakhona.
A blessed family life is not a given. Happy and strong families are built through guidance and help. The Cape Conference virtual pastor is here. Chat with a pastor that has experience in lifestyle, relationships, trauma, and loss counseling. Chat with the Cape Conference virtual pastor on weekdays 3 to 8 p.m.
Welcome back to Masikhanye, Rays of Hope. I am now joined by Dr. Phumlani Majola, who is an author, a theologian, and he's going to be helping me look into the topic of the Sabbath and social justice. Dr. Majola, welcome to Masikhanye.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And I'm really excited to be having you here. But perhaps before we speak about the topic and the book, which informs so much of what we are going to be talking about, please tell us more about who you are and your research interests.
Yes, my research interests, well, of course, my theologians have said, is in the relationship between faith and justice. So my background in terms of my academic background is more into what they call eschatology, which basically means the study of the last things, last events. But I then connect that with social issues which touch our daily lives in society as humanity. And so I link and connect in my passion of interest eschatology, or the study of the last things, according to the Bible, with social issues, systemic issues that we go through in society.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. And of course, you've recently written a very incredible book, The Crucifixion of Justice.
Yes.
And thank you for this contribution. But tell me, what do you hope that those that get to go through this book? Because I'm going to be asking you a lot about what we're going to be speaking about is going to come from this. But what do you hope that the people will get from this book?
I think they should get, as I've said, my passion is in connecting the study of last day events with systemic social issues.
Sure.
And many times when the book of Daniel is looked into, it is looked into in terms of the big prophecies about beasts, about horns, about the scary stuff, and people are left shaking in their boots
Sure.
about last day events.
Sure.
But in this book, we find that, I hope that the reader will find that God is actually, among other things, obviously, but he's talking about our daily situations as well. Not about past events or far into the future events, but current events in society and also in our own individual lives.
Sure.
And so in the book of Daniel, you will find from chapter 1 to chapter 12 that God is dealing with systemic issues of power, issues of righteousness and justice.
Sure.
And of course, His holiness stands out in the book of Daniel. But one of the punchlines in the book is that God's holiness is actually premised on His righteousness. What makes Him holy is particularly His character, His uniqueness above all of humanity. So hopefully those who read the book will be blessed by what they find in it.
And of course, the one thing that comes through from the book and from the preamble that you've just given is that God does actually care about what is happening in the world systematically.
Sure.
And of course, that is not the message we often hear from church. Oftentimes we hear more about God that cares about personal
Yes.
sins, and sometimes seems to not care so much or even wink at systematic and
Yes.
social sins. Is that a fair observation?
It is true. It is true. God does care, obviously, about the individual.
Sure.
Jesus loves every single individual. He loves us individually.
Sure.
But at the same time, while his individual care is also shown in his care about the systemic issues in society, because they are the context in which we live out our daily lives. So whether it is issues of economy, politics, in terms of power issues, power structure issues, or even judicial justice is also a factor. So everything that affects us in terms of being a context of our daily lives is something that God has regard for. And that's where the issue of social justice comes in.
And one of the points that you make, of course, is that social justice is the premise to the worship of God.
Yes, and I can tell you why.
Sure, please, go ahead.
Look, in the Bible, predominantly, when you find in the book of Revelation, for example, book of Daniel, other parts of the Bible, worship is usually triggered by one of two things. God is revealed as a creator, therefore you get a response of worship to God, especially in the book of Revelation.
Sure.
But another trigger of worship that you find in the visions, for example, and elsewhere in the Bible is that of redemption. But what people sometimes miss is that redemption is actually one side of a coin. The other side is what is called condemnation. And both sides of the coin together, they constitute God's judgment. So judgment is about coming into a situation and one is saved, one is lost based on God's decision in the matter, of course, which is informed by individual choice. Now, that's where justice comes in, because if God is our Redeemer, then He must be our judge. And of course, in the Bible, for example, in the story of Abraham, when Abraham was talking to God about Sodom and Gomorrah, and the impending judgment on them, Abraham said, shall the judge of the earth not do right? So even Abraham understood that God is the judge. And part of that means God is our Redeemer, He's our Savior. So justice, therefore, is intrinsic to the texture of the whole Bible, really. So judgment is not bad, but it can be bad. Judgment may mean vindication, may mean redemption, may mean salvation, deliverance. So it's a good thing, but at the end of the day, God is not just our creator, our Redeemer, but is also our judge. Therefore, a source of all justice on the earth.
Thanks for that. And now it makes sense how you then build from that, because you keep mentioning about creation, about the creator, about the judge, and then of course one of the strong points that you make is that the Sabbath is a mandate for social justice.
Yes.
In what way?
It's a mandate. Well, I would like to link it specifically to the Sabbath.
Sure.
If I may. Because the Sabbath, at the heart of it, is about the relationship with our Creator, our God, who also is our Redeemer. Now, importantly, the Sabbath being about our relationship with God means that we are not connecting with God on the Sabbath based on the title of Him being Creator, but we are having a relationship with the individual in all of the roles He plays in relation to us. So you can't say that I connect with God as my Creator, but not my Redeemer. Or my Redeemer, but not my Creator. Or as a judge. But all of those titles, all the things He is in relation to us as humanity, come into play when it comes to the Sabbath. So, therefore, in that way, the Sabbath becomes a mandate for us to consider and have regard to justice and righteousness, which derive actually from Him. He is our justice, He is our righteousness. And if we are going to imitate Him, and if we're going to have a relationship with Him, we therefore need to follow as He does in terms of living out on a daily basis. In line with the principles of justice and righteousness.
And that is in of course, a generic sense, but in a particularized way. I mean, one of the points that you make is that the Sabbath is a particularized call.
Yes.
And you don't just, generalize, but you believe that it's a particularized call to social justice. How do you get there?
Oh, so much can be said on that one. But let me just quickly start as I move towards your question with Deuteronomy 5, verse 15, where Moses is recounting the Ten Commandments. Of course, Exodus 20 talks about the Ten Commandments, verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, for God is the Creator, and so on. But in Deuteronomy, Moses then links the issue of the redemption of the Israelites from Egypt. Which means that as a motivation for keeping the Sabbath. In verse 15 it says, remember you were a slave in Egypt and so on, and because of that you shall keep the Sabbath. So there is that social flavor in the Sabbath that is a trigger for us to keep the Sabbath holy. Now, maybe two of the what I call derivatives, or what is called derivatives of the Sabbath, things that come out of the Sabbath, the weekly seventh-day Sabbath, are two institutions in the Bible, Old Testament. The year of the Sabbatical year is called, and also the year of Jubilee. So maybe we could just talk about those two.
Yes, please.
Because the Sabbatical year meant that every 7 years, slaves would go free. Slavery was permitted by God, not prescribed by God, but permitted by God.
What's the definition? I mean, what's the difference? Because that is very important. That God permitted it, allowed it, but does not necessarily prescribe it. Please differentiate that.
But you see, God was dealing with human beings who had a particular context in terms of the societies they found themselves in. They had a different culture, their own cultures, and they had an influence of the surrounding nations to them. And so God dealt, or rather worked with this group of Israelites and did not immediately remove all the evil or all the bad things that were part of their way of life. But gradually did so. They call it progressive revelation, where God, over time, He reveals things to you slowly and until you become, or you get to where He wants you to be. I won't touch the issue of polygamy, for example, because you have Solomon and so on. People say, the Bible has a man of God, David and Solomon, and with many wives. But then that's a progressive revelation. God slowly reveals to people what He wants, until they get to where He wants them to be. So in terms of the issue of slavery, for example, God permitted it, but then He refined it and removed the core elements of unfairness and injustice from the practices that were already existing at the time. And eventually, of course, it fell off along the way.
I love that.
So, for example, one example about slavery, for example, was that it could not be permanent. But when it comes to fellow Hebrews, but every 6 years or every 7 years, slaves must be let free. Regardless of how much they had owed you. If you had a slave or slaves, because based on what they owe you, and they sell themselves over to you. But every 7 years, they had to go free. And all the debt will be cancelled. And even when you leave, according to Moses again, 15 verse 14, Deuteronomy, he says that you had to give them a starter pack, something to take them somewhere
to offset,
as they go back into reintegrating back into society, to show that God cared about individuals. Yeah.
And then, of course, you were mentioning the two, festivities and how, as they are also platforms to show the particularized nature of the Sabbath towards justice, the year of the Jubilee.
Yes.
And,
Year of Jubilee, I think, together, the Sabbatical year and the year of Jubilee, they show us that the Sabbath, again, around issues of justice, isn't just concerned about our spiritual relationship with God, our faith relationship with Him, and our worship of God, but even the systemic issues, because ecology comes in. The year of Jubilee was every 50 years. The 50th year, all debt could be cancelled. Like if I owe you, based on whatever transactions we've had and I'm unable to pay you, I then have to sell over my land over to you and you can use the land, it becomes yours. But every 50th year, all land automatically must be restored back to the original people. So that balance and resetting every 50 years was to ensure that everyone had a fair chance to make it in life as a community among the Israelites. So you get their ecology being affected because even the land would have to rest on the 50th year. Mustn't be touched. It was a Sabbath for the land. Don't touch the land, don't plant. And at the same time, people had to live by faith in God, because I mean, if you are planting every year and for the whole year, you mustn't plant your mealie meals, don't plant your grapes, your vines, your olives, your olive trees. So the Sabbath was therefore in that way touching on ecology, touching on economy, touching on the political systems, because at the same time, because of the cancelled debt, you lose the creditors would lose the power over those who were their debtors. So, in other words, the Sabbath really touches on every aspect of society. And those two institutions, the Sabbatical year and also the year of Jubilee, they kind of develop those social elements of the Sabbath into the structure of the society of the Israelites, borrowing their notions and what they promote and what they mean from the seventh-day Sabbath. That's why I'm saying that they are called derivatives. They derive their meaning, their value, their worth from the Sabbath. They just highlight particular issues. At the end of the day, it's all about our relationship with God as commemorated, celebrated during the Sabbath day, as God has meant.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, Dr. Majola, because it really lays an exciting foundation for what we're going to be discussing next week about how this relationship between the Sabbath and social justice then should inform how we relate to all of God's creation. I'm really looking forward to that.
Amen. I can't wait as well.
Thank you so much once again. And our viewers, I trust that you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Majola. And remember the book that we talked about at the beginning, The Crucifixion of Justice by Dr. Majola, and how you get hold of it, you can see on the screen. We are not here done. We'll be back soon.
Putting God first can be difficult. In this video, we'll explore what we can learn from Moses to help us put God first in our lives today. Now, Moses tried to save the people through his own power. It didn't work. He was banished from Egypt, and his dreams were dead. After decades of working as a shepherd in the desert, something strange happened to Moses. God called him to revive the dreams of his youth, to see the people of Israel freed from slavery. But the thing is, Moses wasn't ready. He could no longer speak properly and believed he was too old to challenge Pharaoh. He was right about that, but God told him, "Who has made man's mouth? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall say." God told him the same he is telling us today. For Moses, putting God first meant refusing to rely on his own ability and strength. It meant putting his whole life in God's hand and accepting the call based on God's power. Because he had this not-so-confident mindset, God would be able to work through him, delivering his entire nation from slavery. Now, just like God called Moses, you too are called to put him first in your life. There's a special mission that can only be achieved if you decide to put God first in your life. It's not easy, but through the Holy Spirit, you can realize that divine strength is found only by trusting God while acknowledging your own weaknesses. Moses put God first, and his example compels us to do the same. As we return the tithe and promise, we are challenged to put God first.
Welcome back to Masikhanye, Rays of Hope. I am Sivu, I am still your host, and right now I am joined by Meals on Wheels Community Services Regional Director in the Western Cape, Mr. Jeremy Vlotman. Jeremy, welcome to Masikhanye.
Thank you so much, Sivu. It's good to be here.
Thank you, man. I'm really looking forward to this. And Meals on Wheels Community Services. Tell us more about it. What do you guys do? Where are you based? What are you about?
Okay. So Meals on Wheels Community Services was an organization that was started in 1964 by Dr. Bird, who saw the need of the aged who could not cook or provide meals for themselves. And he took on the initiative to provide meals to the seniors. So what he done was he held a fundraiser, bought the first vehicle and the ingredients to cook meals, and it cost about $1,650 for all of that. That was a brand new vehicle.
Wow.
And he got a few ladies together from the church, and they started providing these meals. I don't think he realized the impact of that step, because more than 50 years down the line,
still here.
Meals on Wheels Community Services has grown into a national organization that has its footprint across South Africa. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. So what do you guys currently do?
So Meals on Wheels Community Services focuses on fighting hunger.
Okay.
But if you look at our services, we have broken it down into 4 focus areas. So we look at poverty alleviation, food security, self-sustainability, and fundraising or building strategic partnerships. And within those 4 areas, that guides our service delivery.
Okay.
Yeah, so within the Western Cape, that's where I'm based, we have 21 branches that are based within the community. And that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where things get done. I think if you should come visit our centers, you'll be so inspired by our staff and volunteers who are passionate about what they do and working for this organization. So we have a number of community nutrition centers which provides meals, and through the network of service points within communities, we provide and distribute cooked meals. We also have a senior citizens program. And we have 7 centers that particularly looks at providing lunch on clubs and service centers for our seniors. So they cover or they provide services for at least 1,700 registered beneficiaries. And these are particularly senior citizens. And I think if you look at the other services that we have a safe house for children out in Streesbaai, who provides child protection services for children that are at risk and who are vulnerable. So we have a number of programs.
You guys are doing quite incredible work. Thank you for taking the time to share some of those. I understand that you guys are a faith-based organization with strong ties with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is one of the churches that promotes Sabbath observance. Is there any relationship between the good work that you do and Sabbath observance?
As a faith-based organization, that serves as our motivator.
Sure.
So we do what we do because of what we believe as an organization. So when we look at Sabbath observance, for instance, while growing up, for me, the Sabbath was, this very restrictive day where you can't do.
Sure.
You go to church and you can't do this, you can't do that.
Sure.
But as I grew up and I really started understanding Sabbath observance, we realized that it's about worship, it's about going to church. But more importantly, I think the Sabbath is that time that inspires you to live a better life. And when you look at that, the work that we do as an organization, it is derived from our time we have spent in church.
Sure.
We worship God, but we also realize that God calls us to work in our communities.
I love that.
And to build our communities.
I love that.
And Meals on Wheels is that organization that, because of what we believe, we now become that conduit through which God can work within the communities.
I love that. I love that. Effectively saying that you are the eyes, the feet, and the hands of God, to impact the people. Now, we are still reeling and over the effects of COVID-19. We're not yet out of the woods, but as an organization that is at the heart of communities where you do your work, briefly talk to us about the effect of COVID-19, especially on the needy communities that you guys work with.
Yeah. COVID-19 and the impact it had with regards to the national lockdown, we've seen an increase in the number of meals that were required.
Sure.
So, for instance, we would go to a service point and realize that the meals that we prepared wasn't enough because the numbers have increased.
Yeah.
We can, if we look at our stats and the meals that are reported, we notice an increase in the number of meals, the number of people contacting us for assistance. We've seen the increase in the number of people that come to our branches requesting meals. Sure. And as an organization, we need to rise to the occasion. Sure. We need to be able to meet the need as far as we can. Sure. And so looking at COVID, we really have seen that people, because they have lost a job or because they were laid off or there was a reduced income, we realize that poverty, we normally associate poverty with informal settlements. Sure. But what we've seen was that poverty now knows no boundaries. So we've seen people that live in beautiful homes coming and asking for assistance because of the fact that they do not have that money to buy a meal. And so we realized that COVID has had its effect on the community. But I think there's some positives that came out of COVID. I think during this time as an organization, we've seen a growth in our partnerships that we've formed with various with various companies who uses Meals on Wheels as a conduit to channel resources to the beneficiaries that need them, And so it's been on the one hand, we realize that the demand has increased, but on the other hand, we've seen God's faithfulness in how He has provided us the resources to meet those needs. So, for instance, if I just review our last number of meals for the last couple of months, we've reached close to 1 million meals per month that we've been distributing. During COVID, we particularly focused on food parcels, and the number of food parcels that we were giving during that time rose dramatically because we could not necessarily cook the meals due to the first,
exactly.
But as time has gone on, we have now started to work under the new normal. And we've adapted so that we could meet the demand that was out there.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I like that. And I like the point that you are making, that while COVID is bad and destructive, but there have been some good things that came out of it. And of course, you rightly point out that, I mean, for me, and as somebody that has observed as well, is, it has kind of rekindled our humanity.
Yeah.
Once again, we got reminded that, hey, because as you said, COVID knows no boundaries, it knows no race, knows no age, and even economic status.
Yeah.
And sometimes people could not even go to hospitals while they have the best healthcare facilities in terms of medical aids, but they can't even get their help. And so COVID has become that thing just that reminds us of our interconnectedness as humanity. Thank you for that. Now, a lot of people that are watching this conversation, Jeremy, and have had that happen to them as well, where they sense that they want to get involved more, they want to impact and serve other people. What are some of the suggestions that you think individuals and families could do in their little corners to serve communities, especially during this time?
Yeah. When I look at the story of Nehemiah,
Sure.
there's so much lessons that we could get out of that story about how we could go about doing community work.
Sure.
Nehemiah, when he was confronted with the calamities of his people, he was touched by that. And through that, he then knelt down and prayed to God and asked God to lead him. And I think the first step, that people can do is you need to be able to empathize and sympathize with people. And then approach God and ask God, what is it that I can do?
Yeah. Sure.
When I look at Nehemiah, he used his position where he was. Many times we feel that we might have to go out. We need to go to a different location. We need to make a difference.
Yeah.
But Nehemiah uses what he has around him to help him draw the resources and people together to help him make that difference.
Yeah.
And so when we look at community work, it's having a heart and using what you have around you. You don't need all the resources. Start with what you have, and then you'll see how God will bless you and use you mightily to make a difference.
I love that. Yeah.
I think another thing that you can do is work on a plan.
Okay.
Because by looking at that and try assessing what you are doing, you would look at what you have and what you need to get in order to continue the work and to complete the work.
Yep.
And people can so when you want to get involved with community work, once you're touched by them, you pray to God, you develop your plan. I think it's important that you surround yourself with people that can help you.
Sure.
Get yourself a team.
Sure.
And whether it's family members, whether it's you and your family, whether it's a group of families, whether it's your church, your business, your company, get people around you, and together you make that difference. So
Thanks.
I think.
Thanks for that, Jeremy. Of course, there are those that said, "Man, I've got empathy, but I don't have the time." I think the best thing for me to do is to partner with credible organizations like Meals on Wheels. What are some of the platforms? How can people partner with Meals on Wheels?
Yeah, we always welcome people into our organizations, particularly to partner with.
Okay.
So, for instance, the first thing that I would say is make yourself available.
Sure.
If you have time, let us link you with a branch.
Okay.
And come and volunteer your time at Meals on Wheels, whether it's peeling potatoes, whether it's delivering of a meal, or whether it's even just keeping in touch with a senior citizen or one of our beneficiaries that needs it.
Yeah.
Make yourself available and come and volunteer some time.
Sure.
I think as an organization, we always welcome people with skills, and we utilize your skills. So for instance, we as an organization are looking at youth development programs, and for me it would be perfect if we could link you up with youth And you can either mentor them, or if you have a skill, we can arrange a training program for them. So yeah, you come and provide us your skill.
Sure.
I think one of the most important ones is just being a brand ambassador for us. Speaking to people about Meals on Wheels.
Yeah.
You know, telling them about this credible organization, an organization whose heart is in the right place, an organization who is passionate about what they're doing, and linking us with opportunities that are out there. The last one, which people tend to make the most important, is your resources. And we need your resources. So if you have resources, whether it is cash, whether it is in-kind donations, you can send that to us, and we will utilize that and ensure that it meets the needs of our beneficiaries, of the people that we serve, of those that are hungry or are destitute. And I think that's how you can get involved with Meals on Wheels.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for that information. And to our viewers, how you get hold of them, you can use the details that are appearing on the screen right now. We cannot end this conversation without giving you an opportunity as we close to share any story from the work that you do.
You know, Sivu, I was really touched by one occasion where we took some external partners that came into our organization to interact with our beneficiaries. And we were sitting with one of our senior citizens. And they asked, though, this question: what does this meal mean to you? And the senior citizen just said, it means love. It represents love.
Wow.
And I realized that sometimes we just look at it and think, man, it's a meal. But to the beneficiary, it means much more. It means a smile. It's interaction. It's love. And we believe that as Meals on Wheels, we serve with love. We serve with kindness. We seek to build our communities. One meal at a time. One meal at a time.
I love that. It means love to the recipient, but I'm also sure it comes from love with you guys.
Yeah. Yes.
And speaking about love, and I just want to thank you, Jeremy, for joining us. And we really enjoyed having you here.
Thank you so much.
And as we are ending this conversation, speaking about love, the Sabbath is also that gift of love from our Creator to us. If you have any questions that you want to give, that you want to share with us, or comments, please use the details that you see on the screen, Masikhanye at cc.adventist.org. I also want to urge you not to forget that from the 25th, this coming week, to the of July to the 31st of July, we are having that inspirational week by Pastor Patrick Stander each evening at 7 o'clock. Let me see you there. Until then, Masikhanye.